Hello and welcome to another video. Today we're coloring this little drawing in my sketchbook. This is the same sketchbook that I didn't really like. I've talked about it several times. Every time I start doing anything in the sketchbook, I bring up how much I don't like it, which makes me feel kind of bad. Like I said, I don't really want to be negative about it, so I'm just going to drop that part. But anyway, we're working in this sketchbook today because I really want to finish it by the end of the week. Just because it's so short. It really only had 32 pages, 64 if you count the front and the back. And so I was like, I wanted to finish it really quick. And this was literally not the last drawing in it, but like the second to last drawing that I did in it. So yeah, I really wanted to finish this, so I did my best. And this basically is just a drawing of my OCs. From the top left, it's Valentine, and then the top right is Emerson, and then the bottom left is Duke, and the bottom right is Kamau. If you've been on my channel for a while, you know those OCs. I just wanted to draw a picture of them fighting because I drew another picture of my other 4 OCs who are in like the same story as these guys. It's also up on my channel of some other 4 OCs fighting because they're also in a friend group. I feel like it's funny when friends fight. Obviously, it just means that they're like past like the friend phase, and now they're in like the sibling phase of the friendship, and I just feel like it makes it seem like they're very close. And so if you're like comfortable enough to fight with someone, it just means like you're very close. And so I feel like all of my OCs that are in the friend groups are very close friends, so I wanted to draw them fighting. I just thought it would be cute and fun. And so yeah, this is just my version of that other drawing that I did, but with these OCs. And honestly, I really like the way that this one came out in comparison to the other one. I feel like the first one that I did at the beginning of the sketchbook, I didn't end up liking it too much. Maybe I'll put it up on the side for you guys, just so that way you know what the drawing looks like. I feel like just talking about it vaguely, you might not remember the drawing. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and put it up for you guys. I feel like this one ends up looking a lot better than that old one, just because at the beginning of this sketchbook, it was the very first drawing I did in this sketchbook. I did not know how the paper worked. I did not test the paper out beforehand. I really just went in ham on the paper with that drawing, and I just wung it. I wung it so hard, and I wung it too hard in the sense that I ended up breaking it. But just because I didn't know how the paper worked, I tried to use all my normal techniques on the paper, and it really fucked up this drawing. I feel like I did not go in with a plan, and I did not make a very good sketch. And then I lined a sketch that I didn't really like, and then I went over the sketch with markers. Then I went over the drawing with markers, and I feel like I did not know how to use the paper because the paper is a little bit rougher than usual, and I was like, oh, it makes my markers feel super dry, and I couldn't get the blending to look in a way that I liked. And I ended up putting a minimal amount of effort into it, just because I was like, this thing is a wash anyway. I'm not going to try anymore. I think after I got to this point in the sketchbook, I knew what the paper was like, and so I went in a little bit more prepared, so that way the drawing would not come out in a way that I didn't like. I knew that the markers were going to feel dry, and so for a lot of it, I was using the chisel side of the marker instead of the brush side, just because the brush side is a lot more sensitive than chisel side. The chisel side is still like a felt tip, but I just feel like it feels more solid than the brush side is. So I used the chisel tip a lot on this paper instead, and I was able to saturate the paper a little bit more. And I went a little bit darker when I started doing the shadows, so that way the shadows would actually show up. And I did a lot better job on the line art, just because I knew that the way that I lined it before was with the 0.3 pen, and it does not really work. That really small pens did not really work on this paper, so I went in with 0.5 instead, and I feel like the line art turned out a lot better. It's just like I learned so much about how to work with this paper over the course of obviously using the sketchbook, and so I just feel like in comparison, this second piece turned out a lot better than the first piece, which now I kind of feel bad for. Now I kind of feel like I have to redo that other one, but I'm not going to, at least not anytime soon, because I don't have another sketchbook that's like this size. So we'll see if I do, the next time I do like an 8.5 by 11 type size paper, maybe I will recreate the sketchbook page, but I'm not sure yet. Getting into a little bit about this piece, I really didn't super plan it out too much. I know I said that I learned from that very first one that I did, and I planned it out more. It's not necessarily that I planned it out more, it's just like I had different expectations going into it, and I knew what to expect, so I was able to handle it on the fly a little bit better than handling it on the fly the first time. And so when I actually initially drew this sketch, I only drew like their positions and like their heads, and I didn't draw their hands or anything. And I really just, after I finished the sketch, I just went on to the inking, and I freehanded like their hands and shit, which is why their hands look really bad, but they're not that bad though, honestly. But for freehand hands, I mean, they're all different sizes, which is kind of like, okay, buddy, we can tell you freehanded the hands in that sense. But they all pretty much look like hands, and I feel like the hands are way better than the ones that I did before. I just feel like the sizing of them is the only thing that's off. I feel like if they were all similar sizes, it would not look so much like that I freehanded it. So, but yeah, I feel like the hands, even though they're freehanded, they actually did not come out too bad. I feel like the worst one is probably Valentine's hand that's in Duke's hair, but other than that, I feel like the rest of them are pretty passable for hands. And so yeah, and then I wanted to make a pretty strong shadow when I was coloring this, just because for the first one that I did, the shadow was very, very light, very weak, I feel like, just because like I said, I didn't know how to work with the paper yet, but I was like, I'm going to really go hard on the shadows for this one. And I feel like I did good with the shadows for all of them, but when I got to Duke's shadows, I was like kind of freaking out, because I put some pinkish colors, well, not pinkish colors, but I put pinkish colors in 2 of the shadows, and then when I got to Duke, I was like, Duke has darker skin, but all my darker skin markers are pretty desaturated, right? All of my darker browns. So I was like, well, what if I put red, like a very bright red, as the shadows? And I was like, I don't know if that's a good idea. And so I tested it out very lightly on his hand, and I was like, that doesn't look too bad, but it does look very noticeably red. And so I went over it with the brown, and I initially didn't really want to do that because this drawing actually has very minimal blending. I was actually doing most of it just cell shaded without going over it again, just to keep it simple in comparison to the other one. But then I was like, oh, but if it's just red, it's gonna look weird. So I went over with brown, and I was like, okay, that's fine. And then I was like, well, you know what, when I do the face, I'll just do the brown, so that way it's like not like too dark or anything. But then I was like, but then it won't match the hand. And so I was like, okay, I'll do the brown. I think I did the brown first, and then I went back in with the red, and then I went over with the brown again. But I was like, I think it needs the red. And you know what? I'm honestly very glad that I did the red. It makes his skin look warmer, for one. And then for 2, I feel like it adds good dimension. I feel like it looks nice. And I was like, wow, actually making a decision made it look better. I feel like it would have looked nice even without the red, but I feel like the red really, like I said, it really adds like life to the skin. And so I don't know if that would only work with this paper, just because the way the paper works is kind of weird. But I will have to try that out again, because I feel like it did turn out very well. It's just like, I'm afraid of making the skin too red, because like, if it's too red, it's like he looks like he's sunburned or something. Obviously, it's harder for sunburns to show up on people who have darker skin, but that doesn't mean you can't get a sunburn with darker skin. And it'd be like, why is his skin so red? And I was like, I don't want it to be too red. I want it to be like a realistic sort of red, where it's like a reddish brown and not just red. And the only thing I really would want to change about the skin is that I would have liked to add a warmer sort of color to Valentine's skin. I think now, in comparison to the others, now that Kamau has the red, and then Duke and Emerson both have the sort of pink tone, all their skin looks very warm, except for his seems very desaturated in comparison. But it's kind of too late to change that now. But anyway, after I moved on from the skin, I did everybody's hair, and I did this fun thing where all of my characters, honestly, most of my characters are color coordinated. It's just the way that my mind works. I'm like, give them a signature color, right? And so each of the characters has a signature color, and I did this cute thing where I used their signature color in their hair, and I was like, I should have done that for the other one. And it would have been a little bit harder for the other one, just because Cricket is one of the characters from the other one, and his signature color is green. It's like, how do you put green in blonde hair? I think it can be done, and I think I'm going to try experiment with it just for funsies. But I thought I think all of their hair came out really cute. And also, since they all have different highlight colors, like since Valentine's highlight color is pink, and then when I get over to Kamau, his highlight color, his color is blue. So it really changes the tone of their hair. So even though both their hair is black, it's different tones of black, and I think that's so fun. I think that came out really well, you guys. Like I said, this is actually a very simple drawing, and it did actually take me a long time to color it, just because it is 4 characters, but other than that, I feel like it was really simple. But I feel like just making these slight changes makes them look different. I think it's just a really fun way to stylize things. But I mean, prior, I probably would not have put pink in the character's hair, but I was like, well, if I'm putting like the red in Duke's hair, and I'm going to be putting the blue in Kamau's hair, why can't I add the pink, right? And it's like, would it be unrealistic? But it's like, it doesn't matter if it's unrealistic, because it's a drawing. And I was like, yeah, it's a drawing. And I always forget that since it's a drawing, I can do whatever the hell I want. And I always try to get like so like hung up on like rules of what's realistic or unrealistic. And it's like, none of that stuff matters. It's a drawing, friend. Relax. It'll come out good. It'll come out nice. And it did come out nice, and I really liked it a lot. And I was talking about how I kept the shading pretty minimal on this. Like, I just wanted to keep it cell shaded. The only things that aren't really super cell shaded is their hair. I mean, I added some highlights and stuff into the hair just because, it's hair. It's going to have highlights. The only one whose hair doesn't have highlights is Kamal's, just because his hair is like the curly sort of 4C type hair, and it doesn't really catch highlights in the same way. And I was like, well, if I just do like this sort of circular pattern while I color it in, it'll give it like sort of kind of like a curly sort of look. I mean, it's not super curly looking. It's mostly just like a shape, but I feel like I hopefully hope that this it comes out where it looks like it has some sort of texture to it. I have to figure out the way that I like to color 4C coily hair. I'm not really entirely sure how I want to do it yet, just because I don't really color pieces as much as I used to, and even back when I did color it, I didn't really change like the texture or anything for it. I'm like, I have to figure that out, just because I'm like, I have to study hair more. Like every time I make a video, I have to talk about how I have to study more, but it's true, I do have to study more because I'm like, I don't know how it looks. I don't know it's so hard to draw curls, and I'm like, I don't know how curls catch the light. Like, even if you look at Valentine, the way that I did the highlights in his hair, they don't make any goddamn sense, and his hair is a lot less curly than Kamal's is. So I'm like, I don't know what to do. I really have no idea. And I feel like even the highlights in your hair are also affected by like the light source, and I'm like, those highlights are not in reference to any sort of light source, because the light source is coming from the top left hand of the page, and you cannot tell that from the highlights in the hair. I just put them wherever I feel like makes sense, just like all the time. I don't change the shading of the hair depending on the light source, which I really should, because it's very much also dependent on the light source. But that's also something I have to study some more, is light source. I don't know, you guys. I just do my best. I really do like the way this drawing came out. I hope I'm not sounding like I'm nitpicking it. It's just like, I just don't know what's going on half the time. I really am just winging it all of the time. But anyway, after I finished doing their hair, I moved on to coloring their eyes. Listen, none of these characters, I mean, some of them might have the same eye color, but I just did all of their eyes black, except for Emerson. I didn't give Emerson eyes just to show that he's like really pissed off, in that way that they do in anime or manga or whatever. It's like whenever a character is like really mad, they just get rid of their pupils. So I did that for Emerson just because he is like an angry sort of guy. But for the others, I just gave them all black eyes just to keep things simple. I did that in the original, not the original, but the companion piece for this one. I kept all of their eyes black just to keep it simple, even though none of those characters, I think like 2 of them have like brown eyes and the other 2 don't. And then for this one, I feel like the only one who doesn't have, well, actually, I don't know what color eyes these guys have. I never really thought about it. I don't know why not. I feel like maybe Duke probably doesn't have brown eyes, but you know what, I actually don't know, because originally in the character writing that I did for these guys, because they originally come from a story that I was writing for funsies, so I could procrastinate writing another story of mine that I was wanting to write. Duke was described as having blonde hair and blue eyes, and every time I draw Duke and then color him in, he never has blonde hair and blue eyes. His hair is always this reddish color, and his eyes are usually a reddish brown also. And it's like, what is the point of making character descriptions if you don't stick to them? I don't know. Honestly, though, it's because I wrote that story and I was just writing it off the cuff. I was writing it with no plan. I was just like, come up with these characters like off the top of the dome. And so I was like, sure, blonde hair and blue eyes. But then as I get to know them a little bit more and try to figure out their personalities, I'm like changing their appearances in my mind. And so obviously those appearances don't fit anymore because I wrote that appearance for a guy that I didn't even know yet. So obviously the appearances changed, so I had to update their story. I mean, I haven't really written that story in a long time. I mean, I go back and read it sometimes just for funsies, but I mostly don't really write for them anymore. I like to draw them more than I write them these days, which is probably why I don't draw them as much as I used to, because I don't have any ideas for stories for them, because a lot of my story ideas come from my writings first. And so, yeah, but next time I write for them, I'm going to have to update all their appearances, because now all of their appearances are based on how I draw them and not how I came up with their appearances in those writings. So I have to adjust those now. I'm sorry, I didn't talk about how I really did their clothes, because I kept their clothes so simple, you guys. Literally so fucking simple. Like, Duke and Kamal barely have any shading on their clothes, just because I was like, that was towards the end of the drawing, and I was like, I don't feel like doing it. And it wasn't even defined where Duke's body ended and Kamal's body started. Like, he's got his arm around Duke's neck, but I didn't define where Duke's like shoulders end and where like Kamal's body starts at all. I was just like, let's just fudge it with the markers, just because I was like, I don't really want to figure it out. And I didn't figure it out in the sketch phase, so it was kind of like, I don't know, we'll just put it there. That makes sense, right? And I feel like it does make sense, as long as you don't look at it too hard, you guys. Do you guys ever look at my drawings and you're like staring staring at them for a long time. No, you're listening to this video in the background. You're not even looking at my drawing that much. So it's like, I hope you don't notice the mistakes. And I always feel like people are always like telling artists, like, don't point out your mistakes because other people are not going to notice them. And it's like, but I noticed them, and so I feel like I should talk about them. It's like, is it a mistake though? I mean, I feel like it's readable, so maybe it's not like that big of a problem. And then I went ahead and shaded all of their teeth. I don't know why I saved the teeth for the end, but I did. The teeth and the mouths. I just feel like I always forget about the teeth and the mouths until the end of the drawing, because once you like color in all the skin and the hair and like the clothes and stuff, you're like, what feels off? And you're like, there's no shading on the teeth, and teeth need shading, you guys, because teeth are not just white. I mean, honestly, teeth are more yellow than white, but I always draw them as white, and I always put the shadows as like a purple sort of color. I usually use the same color I use for the eyes, even though your eyes are not white either. Your eyes are yellow also. But I don't know, something about the purple I like, and same thing for the eyes. I just don't know. I don't know. Just because something is more realistic doesn't mean that it looks better, you know. Sometimes stylization is good. Anyway, that's the end of the video, you guys. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I will go ahead and see you in the next one. Bye.